Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Culture Shock Podcast, where we talk about things that shock the culture forever. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about music festivals and how they changed our culture. Let's get started. So let's kick it back to where music festivals first started. Music festivals are not new by any means. They predate the first Olympic Games. When the Olympics were first developing, they were not just sports. When it was coming around to be a concept, they wanted it to be a competition of multiple different types of medium and multiple different activities. They had things from arts, sports, and a really big sector in it was music. But instead of it just being a competition, the Olympics always and forever will be more of a celebration with a competition underneath. So that is where the concept of having a whole festival dedicated to the celebration of music first comes about. And music festivals continue after they break off of the Olympic Games for as long as we have record of it. So they really start out as more of a classical music thing. Then they go through an opera phase that it's really big. Then they had a lot of jazz ones pre-World War II. But after World War II, leading up to the Vietnam War, is where we get the first stance of a culture-defining moments and culture building within music festivals at the 60s and 70s hippie-based peace and love festivals. And this is the first instance of the phrase PLUR being used. The acronym means peace, love, unity, and respect, which is a thing that really drove the festival culture and still drives it to this day in some areas. Some of the first instances of PLUR were at the Woodstock 69 festival. This kind of is seen as the ideal music festival. It was like a crazy amount of numbers, something like about 500,000 people showed up, and there was little to no violence. This idea of peace being moved on and have one of the most successful music festivals of all time and kind of being used as the blueprint to model future music festivals in the future. And that was really the standard for the 60s and 70s music festivals. They wanted to recreate the vibes of Woodstock every single time that they could. They had it in America, they had it in Europe, all over the world, their own versions of Woodstock, where it was all peace, love, hippies. And it continued like that for the rest of the 70s until we got to the 80s, where there was a really big switch. The festival Live Aid in 1985 was one of the first time that the proceeds for the festivals and the peace and love were not being directed at the audience, but to someone else in a different part of the world. All of the proceeds for this festival ended up going towards Ethiopia's hunger epidemic and how it was really starting to become a global issue, just the fact that so many people were dying of famine and how many people were affected by this issue. They finally came together and realized we need to do something about it. And why not do the most traditional forms of festival and raising money by putting on a music festival? And something this also started the trend of that stayed for different types of years for the history of music festivals is it was the first time that a festival was broadcast on live television. And it was also the first time that there was different orders of the festival in different parts of the world. And this was a very successful move for them because viewership went to 1 billion plus people, which was something that they would have not been able to have the money in attendees and donations for if it was just in one part of the world. Where this culture really evolves into something completely different is in the 90s and early 2000s. At this point in time, America was reaching the Attitude Era, which is a whole nother podcast episode that I have to make. But the Attitude Era was, in short, this era where middle finger culture and punk rock and being angsty became the mainstream for not just teenagers, but for adults. So festivals have to evolve with that as well. So this peace and love and unity vibes that were originally with Woodstock and Live Aid were kind of interpreted in a different way where it was unity, but it was this unity FU. So this is where we get the iconic festival Woodstock 99, where they were trying to take a modern take on Woodstock 69, and it failed. It was this instance where people were not trying to have the love, hippie, relaxed culture because of the culture at the time. So it became very violent. There was burning down. There was a lot of assault. So the idea and record of not having any violence at festivals and people really being together wasn't really a thing as much anymore. But This did pave the way for one of the most culture-defining things in the early 2000s, especially for rock and roll, the On the Vans Warped Tour. On the Vans Warped Tour, of course sponsored by Vans, the shoe company, was this tour that you could see your favorite punk rock and pop punk artist in music festival style, but taking inspiration from Live Aid to where it's not just in one location, it's in multiple locations across America with a touring group of artists in vans, bringing it to a city near you so you can get the festival experience no matter what part of the country you're in. And this proved to be a very successful concept because each year they make $18.6 billion, and they have been doing this tour since 1997. And with the success of the On the Vans Warped Tour, it opened more ideas for more festivals across America to feel confident enough to frame their own festival in their location, since this festival was being able to be so successfully produced in their hometown. Hundreds of thousands of festivals just appeared to what seemed overnight, which led to the festival boom of the early 2010s. But this did separate music festivals into two different categories. The crowds that wanted to bring Plur back, and the crowds that made it to what is now called the Influencer and Web Celebrity Olympics. So there are nowadays modern festivals that are very mimicked after what was going on in Woodstock in the 1960s and 1970s. A really big one, they have two really big ones actually. They have Bonnaroo and Electric Forest, which are multi-genre music festivals with a focus in on peace, love. They have things that they had back then like group meditation. They have yoga classes. It's more than just a music festival. It's a more celebration of the culture that captivated from the music festival. But other ones like Coachella and Lollapalooza, that's a different story. Lollapalooza and Coachella are probably two of the biggest music festivals that are going on right now. In the year that I'm recording this in the year 2025. Coachella had recently just happened, and people have had some pretty interesting opinions on these festivals in the past couple of years. People frequently complain that these festivals are no longer about the music and celebration of music, and are more about the social media graps and moments and fame that you can get through going to a festival like Coachella. At some points, people are even going out to fake that they're going to Coachella for the fame that comes with it, which almost tends to have a new wave of festival culture, a culture that we haven't seen before iPhones were invented, where people less care about the festival and care about having the aesthetic of the festival, almost making a third wave festival culture within itself. But one thing that really is saving this idea of Plur is the idea of EDM and electronic dance being put into music festivals, especially in a modern lens. EDM culture frequently gets mistaken when it is described to people, but EDM culture right now is the closest thing that we have to 60s hippie culture in the sense that Plur is the thing that is centered around. Like, people all around are always checking up on people. People are always trying to figure out that people are trying to have a hard time. Because EDM and dancing for several hours like that is very difficult. It's very hard on the body. So there is always people going around checking up. They even made a Plur handshake where they do peace, love, unity, respect. It is kind of the only vessel that's trying to save this idea of peace and love in through modern music and modern music festivals. That is the end of this episode, so let me know in the comments below. Do you think that Plur is dead? Or do you have any music festivals coming up? Anything music festival related? Please add into the comments or any more insight that you want to have into this conversation. You can check me out on social media at Instagram at _Culture Shock Podcast, where I give a little bit more information about upcoming episodes and having community involvement on picking topics and having opinions that I say live in the episode. So once again, thank you so much for listening to the Culture Shock Podcast, and catch me back next week where we talk about all things that shock the culture forever.